In Yu-Gi-Oh, the term beatstick is used to describe a monster whose purpose is to attack for a large amount of damage in an attempt to win the game through pure overwhelming attack power. So, with that out of the way, we'll be going over the best cards whose primary purpose is to act as a giant beatstick. And at number 10, we have Summon Skull. Summon Skull is just a normal monster that doesn't really do much, but it does have 2500 attack while being level 6, which meant for a time in the earliest days of Yu-Gi-Oh! It held the distinction of being the highest attack monster you could summon for only one tribute. Because of this, it basically defined the more competitive side of the game, acting as a boss monster that most players would rush to get out so they could win by beatdown. Funny enough, even though Summon Skull was released almost exactly 20 years ago in the TCG, and Konami loves retraining and supporting old iconic monsters, Summon Skull didn't get a retrain until rather recently, where in 2019, Konami released a series of Archfiend monsters. But despite these releases, neither the retrains nor the original Summon Skull are really good enough to see play in modern times. But it wouldn't be fair to leave Summon Skull off this list due to how game-defining it was in its time. And speaking of cards that were game-defining in their time, and at number 9, we have Cyber Dragon. This is a level 5 machine-type monster with 2100 attack and the rather simple effect that if only your opponent controls a monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. So what makes Cyber Dragon so good as to be on this list? Well, when it came out, the ability to special summon a monster was actually very uncommon, and the best monsters you could normal summon only had 1900 attack, with any monster with more than 2000 attack generally being held back by the need to tribute summon or had some kind of negative effect that restricted your ability to get it out or attack, like Panther Warrior requiring a tribute in order to declare an attack. So because of this, a 2100 attack monster that could bring itself out from the hand without taking any resources, even your normal summon, was supremely good. Cyber Dragon's release sort of warped the game around it to the point where after it was printed, the rest of the game sort of needed to rush to catch up to it, and even years later, it continued to show up in the competitive scene, with representation peaking in February of 2012, where it showed up in a whopping 119 separate topping decks. Since its heyday, Cyber Dragon has gotten lots of support to the point where now there's an entire Cyber Dragon archetype that in of itself has its own strong beatsticks. And while the archetype is good and does occasionally see rogue competitive success, Cyber Dragon is no longer used as a beatstick in it, and instead is mostly used as material for the archetype's other monsters. So as a pure beatstick, it only takes number 9 spot on this list. And at number 8, we have number 62 Galaxy Eyes Prime Photon Dragon. This is a rank 8 Xyz monster that requires any 2 level 8 monsters as its materials. It has 4000 attack and the effect that, if it battles, you can detach one of its Xyz materials in order to have it gain attack equal to the combined rank of all Xyz monsters on the field times 200. And given that it itself is a rank 8 Xyz monster, that's already at least 1600 extra attack it gains from its effect, which only gets bigger the more Xyz monsters that are on the field. And it also has an additional niche effect that if it's destroyed while it has Galaxy Eyes Photon Dragon as one of its materials, you can special summon it 2 turns later during the standby phase with double attack but without any of its materials, so it's not really a proper Xyz summon. However, it does have a negative effect that unless it has Galaxy Eyes Photon Dragon as one of its materials, it only deals half damage. Now, obviously a monster that gets up to 5600 attack on its own power makes for a pretty good beatstick, but you might be surprised to learn that despite requiring Galaxy Eyes Photon as a material to prevent it from having its own damage output, most of the competitive decks that ended up using the card were not Galaxy Eyes decks, and were instead Blue Eyes decks that used it as an extra option in case they ran into bigger monsters and to better close out games, which is exactly the type of card that this list is looking for. And at number 7, we have Dark Rebellion Xyz Dragon. This is a rank 4 Xyz monster with 2500 attack that can be made with any 2 level 4 monsters as its Xyz materials. It has the effect that, if you detach 2 of its materials, you can then target 1 face-up monster your opponent controls and halve its attack, where it then gains attack equal to the amount it halved permanently. Dark Rebellion came out in November of 2014 and pretty much immediately saw competitive success. But why was Dark Rebellion so good? Well, the fact that it can immediately become the biggest monster on the board so that it basically automatically wins at least one battle is really strong. But the true power of Dark Rebellion is the fact that it's a generic rank 4 Xyz monster. You see, level 4 is the most common level for monsters to be in Yu-Gi-Oh!, with over a sixth of the total cards in the entire game being level 4 monsters. And level 4 also represents the level where monsters can have both a decent attack and still have a good effect while still being able to normal summon instead of needing a tribute summon. So, Needless to say, it's really easy for a vast majority of decks to get 2 level 4 monsters in the field to make a rank 4 Xyz. So while Dark Rebellion Xyz Dragon's Ryoko-like effect is good, having that effect on a generic rank 4 that already has pretty decent stat at 2500 attack on its own is even better. The card also was helped by the fact that it was used in the YuGiOh Arc 5 anime by one of the main characters and is kind of a pseudo-part of the Phantom Knights archetype, which in of itself is pretty decent archetype on its own, full of powerful cards. Unfortunately, with the advent of Link monsters, rank 4 Xyz monsters sort of fell out of favor unless their effects were super broken, as Link monsters could be made with any materials, whereas Xyz monsters required you to have 2 monsters at the same level. And Dark Rebellion, while good, wasn't really worth playing over Link monsters, especially in early Master Rule 4, where you were only allowed to have 1 Xyz monster on the field at a time unless you already made a Link monster first. So while Dark Rebellion was used due to how splashable it was, it ironically fell to popularity because it wasn't as splashable as the monsters that would come after it, hence why it only takes number 7 spot on the list. And at number 6, we have High Speed Roid Chanbara. This is a generic level 5 synchro monster with 2000 attack, and it has the effect where it can attack twice each battle phase, and whenever it attacks, it gets a permanent increase to its attack by 200. It also goes on to have another effect that lets you return banished Speedroid cards to your hand if it gets sent to the graveyard. Now, when making this list, I tried to prioritize monsters whose main purpose is their attack power and damage output, rather than any secondary effects they might have, which is why cards like Lunalight Leo Dancer and Access Code Talker don't make it on this list, despite being very strong beatsticks in their own right, with Leo Dancer even having support that makes it become even more of a beatstick. However, since a High Speed Roid Chanbara's other effect really activates after it's been sent to the graveyard, and the card's main uses were outside of Speedroid decks anyway, it felt okay to include on this list. So, with that out of the way, what made it good enough to actually make this list? Well, first off, as far as sheer damage on a generic level 5 synchro goes, Chanbara really couldn't be beat. Its ability to permanently gain attack means that only after 1 battle phase, it will have 2400 attack and have outputted the equivalent of 4600 points of damage, which is sort of ridiculously powerful given that it's over half of your opponent's starting life points. It's also why it's still not released in Duel Links yet. Its generic damage potential is just too high for a game with only 4000 life points, even though it's basically only a beatstick. Even not considering its damage potential, however, Chanbara was also really easy to bring out and sort of just fit in perfectly with the deck that was already playing cards to make it by sheer coincidence. As we previously established, level 4 monsters are really common and most decks play multiple of them anyway, and as a generic level 5 synchro, High Speed Roid Chanbara could be made with any of these monsters plus a level 1 tuner. It was actually True King Dinosaur decks that eventually ended up taking advantage of this easy summoning condition the most, because they have a level 1 tuner of the deck called Dracaleo that they like to play, because it already fit a bunch of other stuff the deck was trying to do. You see, dinosaur type monsters have this gimmick where they get effects that they're destroyed by card effects, and the True King monsters have effects where they can special summon themselves by destroying cards with certain attributes. So they're kind of the perfect match for each other. And aside from the Earth True King, which quickly got limited to 1, the Fire True King is the next best card to play in dinosaur decks, so a bunch of them purposefully wanted to run extra fire monsters to use its effect. Dracaleo was often chosen as one of those extra fire monsters because of its status as a level 1 dinosaur monster, which meant it could be easily summoned directly from the deck with the graveyard effect of Miscellaneous Source if it just banished itself. Or with just the normal summon of Soul Eating Oviraptor who could mill Miscellaneous Source with its effect and then get Dracaleo on the field with Miscellaneous Source using its graveyard effect. Now, you may note that with this setup, the deck could actually summon any generic level 5 synchro, but they chose to run High Speed Roid Chanbara for its generic damage potential, which really goes to show you how powerful this card is and why it takes the number 6 spot on this list. And at number 5, we have HERO Trinity. This is a level 8 fusion monster that's part of the hero archetype. It has 2500 attack and requires any 3 hero monsters as its materials. Trinity has the effect that during the turn it's fusion summoned, its attack is doubled to 5000. And the secondary effect that during any battle phase it can make 3 attacks, but can't attack your opponent directly. Now, a 5000 attack monster that can attack 3 times is obviously good. But even beyond that, the fact that the card in question is a hero fusion monster means that it's actually pretty easy to summon. Heroes as an archetype sort of revolve around summoning their fusion monsters, and even at the slightly steep cost of 3 monsters, the fact that you can use any hero monster means that it's fairly easy to bring out, with cards like Stratos allowing you to search out any extra hero on a non-once per turn effect when it's summoned, or Vision Hero Increase, letting you summon directly from your deck. The fact that he's a hero also means that it can further be increased by 2500 using Elemental Hero Honest in EOS, bringing it up to a very formidable 7500 attack. And with that much attack, if your opponent has 3 monsters that are under 4800 attack, or even 2 monsters under 3500 attack, you can immediately OTK them. Those numbers do drop to 3 monsters with 2300 or less attack if you're using Trinity on its own power, but that's still a formidable card in its own right. And at number 4, we have Invoked Purgatrio. This is a level 7 fusion monster that just requires Alistair the Invoker and a fire attribute monster as its materials. It has 2300 attack baseline, but it has the effect that lets you gain 200 attack for each card your opponent controls. It can also attack every monster your opponent controls once each, and does piercing battle damage when it attacks a defense position monster. Now, compared to the last entry on this list, Invoked Purgatrio doesn't really seem as good on the surface. Compared to Trinity's 5000 attack, Purgatrio can only go up to 4700 attack, and that's if your opponent literally has a card in every single zone, including the extra monster and field zone. So, why did it get a higher spot? Well, while Trinity may be the stronger card in raw attack power, Purgatrio has just a lot more going for it. For one, it's part of the amazing Invoked engine, which has seen consistent play ever since it first came out in February of 2017. And additionally, because of how the Invoked engine works, it can be essentially summoned with only a single card. You see, the Invocation spell card is a fusion spell that lets you banish cards from either player's graveyard in order to fusion summon, and it itself is immediately searched by just summoning Alistair the Invoker. So if your opponent has a fire monster in the graveyard, like a copy of Ash Blossom and Joy Spring, or a Jirak Aleo from the number 6 spot, you can basically just summon Alistair, use its effect to search Invocation, and then summon Purgatrio by banishing both Alistair and the fire monster into your opponent's graveyard. Invocation then has an effect where you can shuffle it into your deck in order to return Alistair from the banished zone back to your hand, where you can then use Alistair's other effect to discard itself and increase Purgatrio's attack by an extra 1000. Purgatrio also has the benefit of actually retaining its attack the turn after it's summoned, unlike Trinity, and can attack a potential of 5 to 6 separate times, whereas Trinity can only attack 3 times. Also, unlike Trinity, Purgatrio does piercing damage when it attacks a defense position monster, so you don't need to rely on your opponent leaving their monsters in attack position in order to OTK, and can just as easily attack a bunch of monsters your opponent might have that they thought were safe in defense mode. Admittedly, if your opponent has an extra monster, they will probably link it away rather than leave it in defense position, but it's still a very useful option to have, earning it the number 4 spot on this list. And at number 3, we have Super Dreadnought Railcannon Juggernaut Liebe. Juggernaut Liebe is a rank 11 Xyz monster with 4000 attack that has an alternative summoning condition, where you can summon it by ranking up on top of any rank 10 Machine Xyz monster. It then goes on to have the effect where it allows it to attack a number of times equal to 1 more than the number of Xyz materials it has, so as long as you're attacking your opponent's monsters and not attacking directly. It also has the effect that by detaching 1 Xyz material from it, you can permanently increase its attack and defense by 2000 for a whopping 6000 attack. But then, the turn you activate the effect, you can't attack with any other cards except for Juggernaut Liebe. Which is fine because in the deck this card is typically played in, you don't really want or need to attack with anything else. Juggernaut Liebe is part of a series of monsters whose entire goal is to make rank 10 machine monsters, rank them up into Liebe, and then attack for a game. See, if you rank Liebe up on top of one of the other cards in the archetype, then activate its effect, and your opponent controls 2 monsters with 2000 or less attack, then you can immediately attack both of them, dealing 4000 battle damage each time and winning the game in a single turn. This effect becomes even more deadly if the card you ranked up on top of was Super Dreadnought Railcannon Gustav Max, that managed to activate its effect to burn your opponent for 2000 damage, in which case your opponent only needs to control 2 monsters with 3000 or less attack in order to immediately win. But seeing as this literal juggernaut of a monster card only got the number 3 spot, what could be strong enough to take an even higher spot on this list? Well, at number 2, we have number 39, Utopia Double. Now with this entry, there is a bit of a caveat, seeing as Utopia Double isn't really the card that becomes the beatstick. See, Utopia Double is a generic rank 4 monster with 0 attack and 2500 defense that has the quick effect where you can detach 1 material in order to add a copy of the spell card Double or Nothing directly from your deck to your hand. It then immediately goes on to let you special summon another Utopia card from your extra deck and rank it up on top of Utopia Double, and then doubles the attack of that monster that you summon. In order to understand why this is good, first we need to go over the card that you'll be summoning with it, number 39 Utopia, which is a rank 4 monster with 2500 attack, and an effect that when a monster declares an attack, it can detach an Xyz material from itself in order to negate the attack. Double or Nothing, the card Utopia Double searches, is a quick play spell card with the effect that if a monster's attack is negated, you can target the monster and it gets to make another attack, and also its attack is doubled. So how you use Utopia Double is that you search out Double or Nothing, then summon number 39 Utopia with it, who will have its attack double to 5,000. You then attack with a regular Utopia but use its effect to stop its own attack. This allows you to use Double or Nothing in order to double Utopia's attack again to a truly staggering 10,000 attack, and then let Utopia attack again. Remember how if you had two monsters with 2,000 or less attack on the board and Juggernaut Liebe immediately let you deal enough damage to win the game? Well, with Utopia Double, you only need your opponent controlling one monster with 2,000 or less attack in order to immediately win the game. In addition to these really good effects, Utopia Double, much like Dark Rebellion Xyz Dragon in number 7 spot, is a generic rank 4 monster, which means any deck that can put 2 level 4 monsters on the board, which is most decks, can make a 10,000 attack beatstick and almost immediately have a game, since Double or Nothing is also completely generic. So what card could beat a super generic, very splashable 10,000 attack beatstick in a list of beatsticks? And at number 1, we have Maju Da Eiza. Maju is a level 3 fiend type monster whose only effect is that it gains 400 attack and defense for each of your banished cards. So how can a simple card like this beat out a powerhouse like Juggernaut Liebe or Utopia Double? Well, in order to understand that, we first need to understand how banishing works in Yu-Gi-Oh! You see, oftentimes, if a card wants you to pay a very heavy cost, it will have you banish a large number of cards from your deck face down, such as Pot of Desires requiring 10 cards, a quarter of most decks, be banished in exchange for drawing 2 cards. There's also cards like Gizmek Orochi, the Serpentron Sky Slasher, which asks you to banish 8 cards from your deck face down in order to summon it, then lets you banish another 3 cards face down from your extra deck in order to destroy 1 card on the field. There's also Eater of Millions, a card that has a very good removal in the form of a once per turn non-targeting banish effect of any card it attacks, but requires you to banish 5 or more cards from your hand, field, or extra deck in order to summon it. But because these cards all ask that you banish so many cards in order to activate their effects, they have the benefit of making Maju Da Eiza even bigger. With a single Eater of Millions, you can choose to banish your entire extra deck, which immediately takes Maju up to 6,000 attack, tying with the attack of Juggernaut Liebe after activating its effect. If you then go on to activate Pot of Desires, it takes Da Eiza up to 10,000, immediately letting you match Utopia boosted by Utopia Double and Double or Nothing. And you can do all this while drawing cards and getting one of the best types of removal in the game on your field. This isn't even to mention the possibility that Maju also benefits off of cards like Golden Castle Strongberg, which banishes 10 cards from your deck during the standby phase, but lets you summon a monster directly from your deck, and has the passive effect to destroy any monster your opponent controls that tries to attack, and burns your opponent for an amount equal to that monster's attack. So, for being able to get to some truly ridiculous amounts based on effects that are supposed to be detrimental to you, and seeing competitive success precisely because it was a humongous beatstick, Maju Da Eiza takes the number 1 spot on this list. Alright, and that's the video. You may have noticed that Sword Dragon wasn't on the list, even though it should have been a shoo-in for a list like this. That's because Sword Dragon is on my internal ban list, which is a list of cards I try to avoid talking about in top 10s because they've already appeared a bunch of times in other lists. But I felt it would be unfair to not mention it at all, so you can think of it as sort of an honorable mention. Anyway, are there any other beatsticks that you think that I should have mentioned? Or do you have ideas for future videos similar to this one? If so, I'd love to hear about them down in the comments.